From Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Madagascar, Badioni Azane, Solitata Bazoga, Badioni Azane, Solitata Bazoga.
Viva EFF, viva! Viva! Long live EFF, long live! Long live! I wule EFF, I wule! I wule EFF, I wule! Wile Musoma Buru wile! Wile Musoma Tola Mwimele wile! Wile Musoma Lata Marukhwana wile! Manja! Ili got EFF Billy! Ili got the government in waiting Billy! Manja! Aigwe! Ya Afrika! Aigwe! Ya Afrika! I discipline! I moral! I discipline! I moral! Thank you very much. The leadership of the EFF Central Command Team, led by our National Coordinator, Commissar Mpora Makata, the leadership of all provinces present here today, our international guests, the deployed cadres in Parliament and provincial legislatures, the leadership of the university led by Dr. Maketa, with all staff members present here, in particular the cleaners of this university. We want to send our revolutionary greetings to all of you, including members of the media. Welcome to the first National People's Assembly of the Economic Freedom Fighters, a national economic emancipation movement in South Africa whose aim is economic liberation and freedom for the people of South Africa, Africa and the world. The National People's Assembly is a gathering of elected delegates from branches of the EFF from across South Africa and the highest decision-making body. It is a People's Assembly because its deliberations and resolutions reflect the genuine will of the people. It is a People's Assembly because, unlike all other political parties, its mandate and mission is a total liberation of the people and not a platform to please capitalist and imperialist forces that stand opposed to the struggle for socialist transformation of our society. We gather here in Mangaung, Free State Province, symbolically because this is the center of South Africa, a country which has for many decades suffered economic deprivation and dispossession of the majority by the white minority. Mangaung and Free State are home of the EFF, and this historic moment will demonstrate that indeed this is the home of the economic freedom fighters. The first National People's Assembly of the EFF gather under the theme People's Power for Economic Freedom, symbolizing the very fact that when properly galvanized and told the truth, the people are the ones who liberate themselves. We will now unpack the theme of this august occasion. What do we mean by the people? Because not everyone is included in our definition of the people. Others are just human beings and not the people who are fighting for. When we speak of the people, we speak about the dejected and neglected masses of our people. When we speak about the people, we speak about the unemployed youth and adults who are forever looking for jobs and cannot find them. When we speak of the people, we speak about the informal settlement dwellers who live like pigs in congested squatter camps with no clear water, no electricity, no houses and no sanitation. When we speak of the people, we speak of the security guards, the cleaners, the petrol attendants, whose salaries can only take them to work and buy 1 meal per day and cannot afford anything outside sight. When we speak of the people, we speak about the mine workers who risk their lives in the belly of the earth, digging diamonds, gold, platinum, and many other precious and industrial minerals and metals, yet no food. When we speak of the people, we speak about farm workers who are harassed every day by white farm owners. When we speak about the people, we speak of construction workers who risk their lives every day, climbing scaffolds and working many shifts, yet are paid through an envelope with no contract and commitment to better their lives. When we speak of the people, we speak of black professionals who, despite their qualifications, are still subjected to racism in the workplaces and made to report to less qualified white bosses. When we speak of the people, we speak of civil servants who, despite their dedication to the country, to a better future, are always threatened by politicians and forced to commit corruption in order to save their jobs. What power are we talking about? The power is the ability to change conditions. And everywhere in the world, a guided majority have power. The economy is a source of power. Control of the state is the source of power. Control of cohesive force is the source of power. The people, the power is the people who are committed and loyal to a political program. The economy we are talking about is the economy of South Africa, which, if controlled and largely owned by the people, can put bread and salt on the table of each and every South African. What is the economy? The economy is the land. The economy is the mines and all mineral resources. The economy is the food. The economy is the banks. The economy is the many retail stores which import cheap products from other parts of the world. The economy is the technology and science that is greatly advancing to change how the world relates. The economy is pharmaceutical sector which manufacture both medicine and diseases in order to make more profit. The economy is the infrastructure that is needed for human and goods movement, communication, and other necessary services. For a long time, fighters have been celebrating freedom fighters who did everything in their power to fight for and realize political freedom, the right to vote and be voted into political office. Yet, we have never had a movement that fights for the economic freedom for all our people. It is only the economic freedom fighters which has a program, determination, and the will to fight for economic emancipation. But before we go any further, perhaps we must tell our own history, because there are Mickey Mouses that go around telling our brief history on our behalf and distorting it. It is always important that at all times, particularly on occasions like this, we should remind ourselves about where we come from. While we can spend the whole day summarizing our individual and collective involvement in the struggles for the emancipation of South Africa, we would like to take this moment and give the context of where we come from as a movement of the people. We carry the obligation to tell our own history because every day reactionary elements try to give a characterization of the EFF and they always fail to do so. Fighters, on the 11th of June 2013, we made a clarion call to all economic freedom fighters that the struggle for economic freedom will never and must not be abandoned, and then asked a question on what is to be done. We asked this question because former liberation movement, whose ideological, political, and moral, including historical mandate and obligation was to totally emancipate South Africa from crisis levels of starvation, unemployment, poverty, inequalities, hopelessness, and potential social instability, is not doing so. The ruling party is hard at work suppressing and strangling all progressive forces that seeks to transform South African economy. To illustrate the fact that we use sober and scientific tools of analysis, we made 15 observations on the 15th of June 2013, and all those who paid attention to detail will know that everything we said is correct and will be true for a very long time. We said the following on the 15th of June 2013. The National Liberation Movement will never be a sustainable solution to South Africa's developmental problems in the foreseeable future due to its ideological zigzags and open dominance of neoliberal and right-wing politics. This will give rise to and attach to some sense of political legitimacy to political parties whose agenda and political program is to continue with white supremacy and imperialist domination of South Africa. This is true. The integrity and credibility of the ruling party will gradually decline because it will not address the many massive developmental challenges confronting society in the current conjuncture. Poverty, unemployment, inequalities will worsen under the leadership of the ruling party. This is because the ruling party does not welcome radical policy shifts, is instead obsessed with protecting the interest of white monopoly capital. The opposition political parties to the ruling party oppose it on superficial issues because all the major political formations in parliament carry the same neoliberal, capitalist, free market programs as the ruling party. There is currently no real ideological and political opposition to a neoliberal policy framework of the ruling party. Recently proven by all political parties' adoption of the National Development Plan. You, the former Communist Party, which could have been a left alternative, has been swallowed into reform politics of patronage and will never regain integrity to pursue the working class struggle anytime soon. The Communist Party leadership has been swallowed by the state and currently at the forefront of justifying the ruthless theft of public funds by the incumbent President of the Republic. The former Revolutionary Union Federation, which is supposed to defend the workers' interest, will soon be swallowed into some politics of reform, and all those who push for a radical agenda will be isolated, banished, portrayed as anti-former liberation movement. The dominant faction of the ruling party and the Communist Party in the former Revolutionary Trade Union Federation will rid it of progressive leaders. Despite massive and clear ideological differences, this federation will once again encourage workers to vote for the ruling party despite its directionless. Independent trade unions like AMCU will continue to emerge and grow bigger because the former trade union federations will gradually fail to represent the workers. These independent trade unions are also not a political alternative because they will only lead workers on issues of work and not issues that affect society. Majority of the people in the informal settlements, townships, villages, and other poor communities will disengage from mainstream politics and not vote in successive elections. This will be so if, as fighters for economic emancipation, we do not offer real ideological and political alternative to the status quo. The Youth League of the ruling party has been turned into a lapdog and sent around to repeat what the leadership says, and puppet youth leaders will be rewarded with cabinet posts and other perks to sustain their puppet status. Victimization of those who are suspected of being part of the political alternative in the ruling party will increase with threats of arrest and possible manipulation of the justice system. We have many economic freedom fighters in the ruling party, particularly on the ground, and unfortunately at all levels of its leadership, who will not publicly associate with our movement because they are scared of losing their jobs and income. The middle class will further drift away from the ruling party and now beef up the right-wing political parties, which might increase their numbers in the next general election. Service delivery protests will intensify and workplace stoppages in the mines and farms will also continue in high volumes than before, thus worsening economic crisis South Africa is undergoing. Mine workers will become more militant and will fight struggles for their economic survival, and as fighters, we should be on their side. Social movements and issue-based organizations will remain on the margins of mainstream politics and only mobilize on sector-based issues which will not relate to mainstream electoral and power politics. Any form of generalized uprising will be harshly suppressed by the state machinery and will never escalate to a level where sitting government can be toppled. This should, however, remain a possibility of radically transforming and capturing political power in South Africa with the aim of restructuring the economy. The youth will become more disgruntled under the leadership of the ruling party, and like in previous elections, the youth will be fed with so many empty promises on education and jobs which will never be created because there is no radical and convincing plan on how such will be done. South Africa will be turned into kleptocracy, with government leaders openly looting state resources and pursuing self-enrichment, classifying reports and processes that seek to expose such ruthless behavior. Those around the current president will get richer and more corrupt because they will know that, like him, they are immune from prosecution. That we have been able to forecast and 100% know what was going to happen is a reason enough to appreciate that our tools of analysis are guiding us towards the correct direction. We made this observation long time ago, and all what we predicted happened exactly as predicted. These observations, fighters, have made us revolutionaries to ask the groundbreaking question of what is to be done. Under this question, we have asked basically three questions. Whether economic freedom fighters should remain inside of the ruling party advocating for radical change with the hope that one day the ruling party will, in the immediate future, self-correct, accept this as the only practical way to save society from starvation and declining living conditions of our people. Whether we should constitute an independent political movement not aligned to an electoral political party to advocate for economic freedom in our lifetime, but not contest elections. Whether we should start an independent political party which will contest the general elections with a manifesto that decidedly speaks to demands for economic freedom in our lifetime. These three questions were responded to by thousands of activists from across the country and through various channels. All this ended up with the National Assembly on what is to be done, which happened in Soweto on the 26th and 27th July 2013. In what we should now call the Soweto Declaration, the National Assembly on what is to be done said, I quote, "After careful thought and thorough process of consultation with the masses of our people, we came and resolved that South Africa's people wishes and aspirations must be respected by launching an organization which shall fight, strive, advance these aspirations unapologetically. EFF as a people's movement shall in its content, character and outlook be a true weapon of struggle in the hands of the people and a collective effort to solve people's own problems. The National Assembly recognizes that South Africa is at a crossroad for all wrong reasons. The hard-won victory over colonial, racist and apartheid system have been meaningless, although necessary due to lack of economic emancipation of the majority and African majority in particular. As a consequence, therefore, the South Africans, through their delegates, spoke overwhelmingly that the people need an alternative, a radical, militant, fearless movement to serve their interests. Our immediate program includes registration of economic freedom fighters as a political party that will contest the 2014 election, mobilization and recruitment of members, establishment of all regional, branch and cell structures, and formation of the movement. Our immediate political program includes building a strong movement of community-based workers, youth, students, women, and sectoral formations and organizations that will proclaim economic freedom as their political program. We then adopted 7 cardinal pillars, which outlined what we stand for. Fellow fighters, our primary political program as the EFF and as articulated in the founding manifesto, which was adopted in Soweto, indicate very clearly the 7 cardinal pillars. The analysis, the diagnosis, and solutions provided for in the founding manifesto are correct and will stand the test of time. Generations of economic freedom fighters to come will look up to the EFF founding manifesto in a similar way communists and socialists look upon the Communist Manifesto. The founding manifesto of the EFF is our primary political program, and the 7 cardinal pillars are the main non-negotiable pillars which will hold this organization together forever. The EFF founding manifesto begins with a caption from Fanon which says, "Each generation must out of relative obscurity discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it." The EFF represents a generation which has discovered its mission, and we vow that we will never betray our mission. The EFF 7 cardinal pillars constitute the core of our political program and will never retreat from these pillars. Substitution of any of these pillars has potential to undermine the cohesion of the EFF. The question we should be asking is, what do these 7 cardinal pillars mean in practical terms? Maybe we should start from the beginning. 1. Expropriation of South Africa's land without compensation for equal redistribution in use. What this means is the fact that since 1994, the current government has spent more than 50 billion to buy back stolen land from colonial settlers who are not willing to redistribute the land. We speak today, 15% of our people reside in informal settlements with no land and no hope because government is negotiating unwilling land thieves who inherited stolen land and claim it is their own. 2. Nationalization of mines, banks, and other strategic sectors of the economy without compensation. South Africa is a home to more than 50 industrial and precious minerals and metals, and these minerals are not contributing to the economic expansion of South Africa. Mine workers are treated like slaves, even get killed by the ANC government when they demand better salaries. We need to nationalize the mines in order to locally beneficiate and industrialize our mineral resources. The law, MPRTA, says that the state should be informed of all minerals leaving the country, and such is not happening. Building state and government capacity, which will lead to the abolishment of tenders. What we currently have in South Africa is a corrupt state incapable of performing its own function. The state cannot build roads, it cannot build power stations, it cannot build railways, it cannot build schools, it cannot build hospitals, and it cannot buy even stationery for their own offices. All these tasks are given to corrupt private companies who bribe state officials and politicians for them to get tenders. We need a state that can perform and deliver its own services. I must get water at some point. Free quality education, healthcare, houses, and sanitation. Oh yeah. Thank you very much, Mangaung. Education in South Africa remains a privilege of the few. An absolute majority of our children cannot gain access, particularly to post-secondary teaching and education. The current Minister of Higher Education does not even know how many students should be admitted to institutions of higher learning in the year 2015, but goes to Parliament to ask for millions of rands to finance higher education. We need free quality health care with capacity to service all South Africans. Proper and spacious houses with sanitation like the one the EFF has built for the Kongwane family in Nkandla should be provided for free to all needy South Africans. Massive protected industrial development to create millions of sustainable jobs, including the introduction of minimum wages in order to close the wage gap between the rich and the poor. Close the apartheid wage gap, promote rapid career path for Africans in the workplaces. Majority of consumer goods and services which we consume and buy from the retail stores here in South Africa are not made in South Africa. The plastic product, the electronics such as phones, televisions, sound system, the fridges, and many other products are made in other parts of the world. What this means is that we as South Africa are creating jobs for other people in other parts of the world by consuming imported goods and services that are not made in South Africa. Instead of passing legislation that compels all the retail stores to buy locally produced goods and services, The current government is trying to convince ordinary citizens to buy South African. How are people going to buy South African when there are very few goods and services produced in South Africa? Massive development of the African economy and advocating for a move from reconciliation to justice in the entire continent. The economic development of South Africa is dependent on the development of the entire African economy, where African states trade amongst each other and make sure that we all have real economic activities. The development of South Africa should be linked to the development of Zimbabwe, Swaziland, Lesotho, Botswana, Malawi, DRC, Nigeria, and all the countries in the African continent. Open, accountable, corrupt-free government and society without fear of victimization by the state agencies. We have seen over the recent past that the current government is committed to protection of corruption by state officials and politicians. Corruption of this government starts with the head of state who steals public money and uses all institutions, including parliament, to protect himself from accountability. It is only the EFF that can change these conditions by being true to itself and doing everything in its power to achieve the 7 cardinal pillars. Perhaps we must remind each other. Let us remind all those who care to pay attention that the EFF is a socialist movement which is correctly defined in the founding manifesto. The EFF founding manifesto says, the EFF is a radical leftist, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist movement with an internationalist outlook, anchored by popular grassroots formations and struggles. The EFF will be the vanguard of the community and worker struggle and will always be on the side of the people. The EFF will, with determination and consistency, associate with the protest movement in South Africa and will also join in the struggle that defies unjust laws. The EFF takes lessons from the notation that political power without economic emancipation is meaningless. The movement is inspired by ideals that promote the practice of organic forms of political leadership, which appreciate that political leadership at whatever level is service and not an opportunity for self-enrichment and self-gratification. The EFF draws inspiration from a broad Marxist-Leninist traditions and Fanonian schools of thought in their analysis of state, imperialism, culture, and class contradiction in every society. Through organic engagement and constant relationship with the masses, the economic freedom fighters provide clear and cogent alternative to the current neo-colonial economic system, which in many countries keep the oppressed under colonial domination and subject to imperialist exploitation. The EFF is a South Africa's movement with a progressive internationalist outlook which seeks to engage with global progressive movement. We believe that the best contribution we can make in the international struggle against global imperialism is to rid our country of imperialist domination. We should dismiss with contempt any lousy characterization which defines the EFF as something else different from how it's well articulated in our founding manifesto, as some directionless politicians try to do. Anybody without influence of intoxicating substances will know that the EFF represents the people of South Africa and in particular the working class. Only lazy thinkers who do not rely on scientific analysis of society will characterize the EFF as something else. However, we will forgive them for they know not what they are doing. Workers in Marikana, the industrial, farm and domestic workers who are members and supporters of the EFF are the core of the South Africa's working class. Just through a look in the recent past election will show that the EFF is stronger in communities where the working class are found, such as the mines, the farms, informal settlements that are closer to affluent towns and cities. Our movement is a movement of the working class. We can safely say that we are the vanguard of the working class and all those who do not own the means of production. The EFF is not trapped in some nostalgic reflections and philosophizing of the conditions of the working class. We, together with poor communities, are at the forefront of the struggle of the poor and the dejected masses of our people. Our aim is not to win over organizations that have failed to liberate our people economically, but to defeat those organizations on the ground and carry forward with the socialist transformation of society. The EFF is a Marxist-Leninist Fanonian in character because primarily we are in pursuit of a class struggle in a neo-colonial political setting. The Marxist-Leninist Fanonian character of the EFF is a fundamental to the socialist revolution which the EFF is in pursuit of. The Marxist-Leninist perspective constitutes the correct path towards the attainment of the 7 cardinal pillars which are socialist in character and form. The EFF does not impose what Marx called Barak's communism with forced collectivism, disrespect of individual and authoritarian state. The socialist project we are in pursuit of does not mean that all people will be wearing same clothes, walking the same way, and doing exactly same things on directive of a powerful bureaucracy that disrespects human rights. The EFF does not ascribe to despotism and will not, in the socialist transformation of society, cling to one-party state and cult of personalities, because history cogently illustrated that such undermines the freedom and rights of the very same people the revolution seeks to liberate. The EFF does not ascribe to personality cults. Hence, we distance ourselves from genuine movements which seek to name places after us as individual leaders and activists for economic freedom. We say so because socialist projects and programs across the world were largely associated with single individuals, and that is not what we are fighting for. Socialism is not some huge bureaucracy that disregards rights and freedom of individuals. Socialism does not mean a narrow concentration of state or government ownership, but socialized ownership which in the immediate should have components of state ownership and control. It is not a society where private, non-exploitative property such as houses, cars, and clothes will be commonly shared. Socialism is about ending the private ownership of the means of production, mines, huge farms, monopoly industries. Socialism does not do away with personal non-exploitative property. Socialism does away with private property owned by individuals and used to make profit, such as factories and banks. People will be able to have and cultivate personal property items like cars, TVs, and clothes. Socialism to us primarily means that we should collectively develop the productive forces and make sure that all people have equal access to economic sustainability and have basic needs. The commanding heights of the economy should not be privately owned, and the working class-led state should be able to provide free, compulsory and quality education, free water and sanitation, free quality housing and electricity, free health and treatment of diseases, development that benefits everyone, not few people, democracy, human rights, peace and stability, creation of state bank to assist cooperatives and SMMEs, restitution of land to the people as a whole, and provision of agricultural supports to small-scale farmers. This is one struggle we will win, but major steps should be pursued towards victory of the socialist program. We should all desist from undermining our ideological tools of analysis, because such will undermine the cohesion and coherence of the EFF. Without proper ideological tools of analysis, we'll go nowhere and will only be concerned with common and current affairs issues. The EFF does not discount the fact that in the class struggle we need absolute unity of all progressive working class forces. We need to unite all the progressive forces, and such unity should be on the basis of political socialist program. We are not married to positions of leadership and can give away leadership positions if such will lead to the success of the socialist resolution. We are particularly interested in the unity of organized working class formations under the program of socialism and will not compromise such program. We are unapologetically at the forefront of working class struggle and should intensify, but we appreciate that there are other working class formations which should be brought into a common consolidated political program to jointly pursue the struggle for socialism. This requires individuals and collective political and ideological maturity amongst all the forces that seek a genuine program for progressive socialist change. As a fragmented force, we will always find difficulty in fighting against the enemy. Hence, we need to unite all the left forces. There is no doubt that the struggle waged by political liberation fighters in South Africa and African continent is worth celebrating. But the reality proven through observation of political realities and developments in the African continent and elsewhere is that liberation movements are not capable of resolving the massive economic inequality they inherited from their colonial past. All countries in the African continent that have realized political emancipation have proven that the movements that have taken them from political to social subjugation are not able to take the struggle forward. More often than not, the inability of liberation movements to economically emancipate humanity was ideologically and politically predicted by great revolutionaries and ideologues before us. Our immediate tasks include exposing the widely held view in South Africa that our policies are good and only implementation should be perfected. This is not true, because the policies that protect white supremacy through protection of their economic interest cannot be good. Policies that promote neoliberalism and blind following of the dictates of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund cannot be good policies. Policies that keep an absolute majority of our people under starvation and structural unemployment cannot be good. Policies that deny young entrepreneurs access to enterprise finances without sureties, which most do not have, cannot be good. Policies that keep wages in the mining sector, farms, factories, the police, the soldiers, teachers, doctors, nurses, private security, petrol attendants low cannot be good policies. In 2014, less than 7% of South Africa's land has been redistributed. The indications were that by 2014 will still not have existed 7% land redistribution, which will be 20 years since the democratic dispensation. If we continue with this trend and pace of 7% transfer every 20 years, it means we will have distributed less than 30% of land in 100 years. In other ways, in 100 years' time, the inequalities between black people and white people will still remain, and this will automatically lead to continued racism and economic subjugation of blacks by white people like it happened under apartheid. This generation of economic freedom fighters should never agree to such, because in 100 years' time, all of us here will no longer be alive, and our children and grandchildren will say we sold out, because they will still be living under the white economic domination. More than 100 years after political independence. The struggle for land reform and transfer of land is long overdue and should be speeded up to avoid the conflicts that characterize many post-independence African states, nations and countries. We refuse to continue living like we are in a colony. All this aspiration will require a disciplined, dedicated, determined, focused, fearless and forward-looking cadres who are committed to economic emancipation of South Africa and African continent. It will not be an easy road to be activist and a cadre of EFF, because those with political power will do everything in their power to isolate, banish, retrench, persecute, politically prosecute, tarnish, and even kill economic freedom fighters. If these people can kill their own members because of tenders and control of state resources, they have potential to kill the real alternative, which will take away their ill-gotten wealth and access to resources. We are, however, not scared, and our unity, fearlessness, dedication should inspire the whole generation to fight for what rightfully belongs to all South Africans. We will and have to share in South Africa's wealth. We need to be organized and need to be disciplined. Our mission as EFF is to now speak to each and every person in South Africa, every citizen, every voter, including our children, grandparents, parents, relatives, neighbors, fellow churchgoers, workers, street sweepers, about economic freedom fighters, a giant movement which should and will emancipate South Africa from institutionalized starvation, structural unemployment, political directionless and mediocrity, institutionalized corruption, and hopelessness amongst young people. We need to go to every corner of South Africa, village to village, township to township, suburb to suburb, kraal to kraal, city to city, and everywhere where there is a human life, to speak and preach the message for economic freedom in our lifetime. We need to use all modes of transport to get to where we should preach the message of economic freedom. We will use bicycles, donkey carts, cars, lorries, trucks, buses, planes, helicopters, ships, boats, and all forms of transport, spreading the wave of economic emancipation in our lifetime. In this mission, we are under no illusion that spies, information peddlers, careerists, attention seekers, and detractors will not join us. Our obligation as economic freedom fighters will join us. Our obligation as economic freedom fighters is to convert all this into real fighters for economic freedom in our lifetime. We will not turn away any member who comes to identify with the struggle for economic freedom in our lifetime. We will not force any member to join our movement. We will, on a day-to-day, preach the way for economic freedom in our lifetime. Because the emancipation of South Africa will lead to the emancipation of the whole African continent. Fellow fighters, we should also be careful of staff riders who join the organization for personal gains. EFF is a vehicle for real socialist transformation. And whoever is a member of the EFF should be a member par excellence and not try to pursue individual or other organizational interests within the EFF. Staff riders are fighters whose sole intention is to uplift and uphold only one or two cardinal pillars of the EFF at the expense of the rest. There are people amongst you here who say land or nothing, and they say the rest of cardinal pillars do not matter. You are in a wrong organization. Staff riders are fighters with uncontrollable ambitions for power, who arrive in the organization today and tomorrow they want to leave the organization, ignoring the fact that leaders should first be led for them to be perfect leaders. Staff riders are those who refuse to accept that in certain stages the organization can redeploy any of its fighters to a different responsibility, even when such redeployment means that your salary and benefits will be reduced. Staff riders are fighters who cause violence and disruption because they are convinced themselves that a people's assembly will not have their desired outcome. In the Western Cape, in the metro, there are fighters who disrupted a people's assembly of the EFF. And then, when the EFF in Western Cape went on to launch other regions, these fighters realized that the outcomes of other regions are favoring them, and therefore called on the national leadership, particularly our spokesperson, to say to him, now you can call a people's assembly in the Cape region, because now we are winning. The numbers are now balancing. They were effectively saying to us that for as long as they are not winning, there will never be a people's assembly in their region. Those are the staff riders we need to be care of and isolate. Staff riders are fighters who pledge loyalty. Staff riders are fighters who pledge loyalty to an individual, even when such loyalty compromises the unity of the organization. I'm aware that some have been conducting illegal activities, including caucuses that were dedicated at insulting this leadership. You must whisper to them, we are not scared of them. We want them to fight. There is no one, not a single individual in this assembly who will dare disrupt this assembly. There is no single individual who will dare divide the unity of this alternative movement of those who live in the shacks. Anyone with such dreams, continue dreaming. Staff riders are fighters who steal and misuse money of the EFF, particularly the membership money. Staff riders are fighters who use the EFF to fight battles and settle scores of organizations they come from. We have commonly agreed on a political program, properly articulated in the founding manifesto, and should avoid manifestation of staff riders who are in the EFF for narrow gains. The EFF is a movement in a class struggle and appreciates its Congress black consciousness, Pan-Africanism, and most importantly, the internationalist and socialist character of the EFF in the struggle for economic freedom in a neo-colonial South Africa and Africa. So you must tell them that we do not have black consciousness groups, neither do we have the youth league groups in the EFF. All what we have, it is this characterization I've just outlined. The Congress, the black consciousness, the Pan-Africanist, and most importantly, the internationalist and the socialist character of the EFF in the struggle for economic freedom in the neo-colonial South Africa and Africa. There is no need to jump, you are accommodated. Fellow fighters, there is no need to fragment the organization along those lines. We are uniting here. Chris Hani, Robert Sugungwe, Steve Biko, and Jay Mbara in the struggle for economic freedom, and we shall overcome. The wind for political liberation blew from the north to the south, and the wind for economic emancipation should blow from the south to the north. This wind should gain momentum in our lifetime, and South Africa will be an inspiration to many other African countries to reclaim their wealth and economies from colonial and neo-colonial masters. We are the generation of the economic freedom fighters. But who are the enemies of the revolution? The primary enemy of the class struggle for economic freedom is a capitalist and imperialism. And in the South African context, it is the white monopoly capital. White monopoly capital has political representatives in the form of the ruling party and the Democratic Alliance, who, although they pretend to be on different sides, are ideological allies in pursuit of the capitalist program called the National Development Plan. The EFF is currently the only political formation fighting against white monopoly capital, and in this fight, we still do not have alliances. Of course, there are common agreements on current affairs in Parliament with opposition parties that seek to undermine the ruthless abuse of power by the ruling party, and such do not constitute any form of tactical or strategic alliance with any of the opposition parties. Now, those who say we are in alliance with DA, we have just clarified you. There is no alliance. There is an agreement on current affairs. The DA seeks to protect the interest of white monopoly capital, and the ruling party seeks to do the same with the hope that they will successfully infuse a black bourgeoisie into the capitalist project. It is not a secret that the ruling party seeks to create a black bourgeoisie, and have recurrently said so. The ruling party expressed objective to give a grip to our primary enemy in the socialist struggle for economic freedom in our lifetime. The ruling party has joined the enemy camp and should be treated as such. The EFF is currently in Parliament and represented in all the provincial legislatures. And our approach is that of avoiding to be swallowed by these institutions. Since our election into Parliament, we have been the dominant political power party because our approach is fearless and robust. Our political opponents admit that we are a force to be reckoned with and will be for the duration of this Parliament term. In the few months we have spent in Parliament, we have not only held the executive accountable, but have exposed and tabled coherent and cogent proposals on what is to be done. Since our election into Parliament, we have highlighted the reality of base erosion, profit shifting, and transfer pricing in a manner never done before. have called for commission of inquiry on the condition and payment of mine workers, which the ruling party refused. Have offered the ruling party our 6.35% component in the National Assembly to amend the Section 25 of the Constitution in order to empower the state to expropriate land without compensation. Have called for massive protection of local industries in areas where there are currently no tariffs and duties. Have called for legislation and tabled detailed proposal on localization, which was going to result in massive local production of goods and services. Have called for the transformation of the criminal justice system. Have called for the creation of a viable and capable universities and post-secondary institutions which should accommodate all secondary school leavers. Have called for table proposal on the protection and promotion of arts, culture, and heritage institutions. Have called for and table proposals on comprehensive and activist foreign position, particularly in the Middle East. Have called for and proposed an industrial policy on communication sectors, particularly demanding that all the set-top boxes for digital migration should be manufactured in South Africa. Have called for and proposed that free quality education should be ushered in alongside expansion of an adequate minimum wage across spheres of employment in the manner contained in the EFF election manifesto. Have called for and tabled proposal on the provision of free sanitary towels for all girls from poor background. So any clown that comes to you and say the EFF is not proposing anything, get a copy so that you can clarify that. These are just some of the areas we have tabled in Parliament, yet some yellow communists under the permanent influence of alcohol go around saying the EFF has never tabled any alternative to Parliament. He will not hear us when we table alternatives because he's permanently drunk in Parliament. In actual fact, there is no political party in South Africa which have ever proposed alternative policy positions in the same manner the EFF did in Parliament. All political parties compete on the basis of who is better suited to implement the reactionary and capitalist NDP. But why do you fight so hard in Parliament? We will fight for hegemony and political majority because all the existing political parties carry a reactionary agenda. We fight so hard because South Africa is in a crisis. We are in a crisis of leadership that is failing to take simple and logical decisions because the status quo compromises their personal benefits. We are in a crisis because more than 44% of the South African population, that is more than 20 million people, live below the poverty line with no assurance of where the next meal will come from. We fight so hard because we are in a crisis because 8 million South Africans need jobs and cannot find them. We fight so hard because we are in a crisis of local government that cannot deliver the most basic services. We are in a crisis because the current government cannot deliver electricity to our people. We are in a crisis because the state of education is in crisis, and those in government do not even know where those who pass matric will go after matric. We are in a crisis because more than 60 billion of state resources are not accounted for. We are in a crisis because the sitting president is a corrupt person who does not seek to account to anyone. We are in a crisis because the ruling party politicians are hell-bent on sustaining the status quo because they are benefiting from corruption in their provinces and ministries. We are in a crisis because Parliament is run in a partisan fashion, protecting corrupt individuals and politicians. We are in a crisis because 15% of South Africans live in informal settlements. We are in a crisis because we have no clear foreign policy that will guide the development of the entire African continent. We are in a crisis because illegal goods and services are imported into South Africa with no regulations. We are in a crisis because goods and services which we can locally produce are brought from other parts of the world with no tariffs to foster local production. We are in a crisis because resources that should be on sports development is being used to award ceremonies of the elite. We are in a crisis because judges have now been co-opted into a corrupt system of protecting corrupt politicians. We are in a crisis because farm workers continue to be harassed by white farmers in the same way it happened under apartheid. We are in a crisis because mine workers are treated like slaves and paid slave wages and killed when they protest. We are in a crisis because the status of black people is that of submission even at professional level. We are in a crisis because white domination both continues to undermine potential chartered accountants, engineers, and lawyers. We are in a crisis because public entities are subjected to mediocre managers who are appointed on the basis of their proximity to the sitting president. In all these crises, we have to fight with a determination to defeat them. But before you defeat them, you have to analyze the balance of forces. Domestically, we are waging the struggle for economic freedom under conditions that are in favor of forces of radical change. Everyone acknowledges this reality, and that is why they all claim to be radical, even when they do not know what radical means. The ruling party will self-destroy and self-inflict itself to the point where it does not exist. At the center of the ruling party's self-destruction is its inability to maintain principle and sacrifices everything on the altar of political convenience. At the center of the ruling party's self-destruction is its commitment to subvert internal democracy in favor of political convenience. At the center of the ruling party's self-destruction is tribalism and regionalism, which will see the continued dominance of one tribe and regional group in government and all public institutions. At the center of the ruling party's self-destruction is its undermining of democratic institutions to protect one individual. At the center of the ruling party's self-destruction is its weak and directionless foreign policy. Even if the EFF was not existing, the ruling party was going to self-destruct, and the only unfortunate reality is that they would have handed power to the right wing. Now that we are here, we are the worthy successors of the ruling party, and we will take political power from them with the necessary vigor and energy required of economic freedom fighters. The right-wing political parties such as the DA have reached a ceiling and will never attract more blacks, particularly African voters, like in the 2014 general election. The DA has reached a ceiling and will never grow any further. The only political movement which has only the sky to limit its potential is the EFF, and will take over political power. We will do so because majority of the people are beginning to appreciate that our primary enemy, white monopoly capital, and their political representatives, the DA and the ANC, no longer have ideas to take the country forward. Internationally, comrades, fellow fighters and commissars, we are living in a world which is tolerant of the progressive change and progressive movement. We make this observation and analysis because those who sold out the progressive agenda in the early 90s did so on the basis that the global balance of forces were not in favor of progressive change. Indeed, in the early 90s, the dominance of neoliberalism in the world and the collapse of the Soviet Union gave rise to a neoliberal hegemony all over the world. Many governments across the world were made to believe that there is no alternative to neoliberal dominance and hegemony. That is part of the reason why the ruling party-led liberation movement neglected the Freedom Charter and adopted the reactionary gear. Now, the 2008 financial crisis has brought to an absolute end the myth that neoliberalism is invisible. The rise and continued dominance of China means that we are now living in a bipolar world. We should constantly ask if China's rise and role in development of Africa economy constitutes some form of recolonization. What is revealing about China, though, is that the state is in control of strategic sectors of the economy. Instead of engaging with Chinese on a country-by-country basis, the African continent should consolidate a common pan-African economic engagement with China, which should necessarily result in the development and expansion of intra-African trade. As separate and standalone entities, African countries hold no capacity to fairly trade with China, so a common approach is long overdue. Comrades, we should know that South Africa's foreign policy, particularly consolidating pan-African agenda, is not very convincing. Since Zuma surrendered the life of brother leader Gaddafi to imperialist murderers, Africa is lacking of a pan-African voice which should unite African forces. Gaddafi's death has surrendered our continent to even intense exploitation by imperialist forces. We speak here today with more than 80% of funding for African Union and the Pan-African Parliament coming from European Union. Gaddafi was the only one who was willing to fund the African Union and was the only one who took practical steps to unite the African continent. In honor of Colonel Brother Leader Gaddafi, the EFF should fight the political and most importantly economic unity of the African continent. Comrades, commissars and fighters, we need to develop thorough understanding of the religious fundamentalism that has endowed the African continent, represented by the terrorist activists in Kenya and Nigeria. What is the class analysis of these realities and kind of terrorism? Overall, the EFF struggle for economic freedom should inspire all economic freedom fighters across the continent and diaspora. The incoming CCT should visit most countries in the African continent and in all regions to explain our perspective and vision for the African continent. We should do so because it will never be wise to wage a struggle for the economic emancipation of the African continent without the support of the entire Africa. The internationalist character of the EFF means that we are an international organization and movement which should mobilize all the progressive forces in the African continent. This is what we need to do when we leave this place. All these aims and objectives we are talking about here will not find an expression and meaning unless we organize into discipline and united force for economic transformation. This National People's Assembly is not the end of our task as activists in building the organization. It is actually the beginning. The immediate task for all regions and provinces is to launch branches of the EFF, real branches of the EFF, in all wards of South Africa before the end of June 2015. When we say all wards, we mean all wards of the country, and all these branches will have a minimum of 100 members and elect branch command teams. The progress of all RCTs and PCTs will be measured by launching 100% of the branches in their communities and municipalities. This National People's Assembly should give a mandate to the CCT to disband RCTs and PCTs that fail to launch branches in all the wards of their regions and provinces. The second immediate task is that all regions should submit the entire membership file. We are asking for all members because we know that branches only submitted 100 members for the purpose of audit. The incoming CCT should coordinate a process which will result in all members of the EFF being recognized and receive their membership cards on time. When branches are launched, the political education unit of the CCT, the PCT, and RCT should induct the branches. Political induction is important because, like Thomas Sankara said, a soldier without a political and ideological training is a potential criminal. Branches of the EFF should not just be committees of few individuals who are always wearing red beret and overalls, ignoring the struggles of the people. Branches of the EFF must always be at the forefront of the struggles in their communities. Branches of the EFF should detail all the problems surrounding their community. This meeting should consider and resolve on the establishment of the EFF Youth Command team. The EFF Youth Command will move to occupy the vacuum that exists in youth politics. There is currently no youth political organization in South Africa where young people can creatively and in an autonomous way think and implement programs that will energize the youth. The EFF Youth Command should be a vibrant and fearless organ of the EFF and should be granted the necessary autonomy to act within the necessary youthful manner and feed the EFF with the next layer of leadership. The EFF Youth Command should take up community struggles and fight for the youth development and be the torchbearers in the struggle for economic freedom. In history of political development, it has been proven that revolutions are activities of the youth. We therefore need to organize the youth into the Youth Command with their own constitution, program of action, youth assemblies to elect leadership at various levels. Fellow fighters, the NPA should also consider and resolve on the formation of the Women's Command. History has also proven that the most reliable and most fearless detachment in any revolution is women. Women are not picked to fight for positions. They always prioritize the program of the organization. Women are never ashamed of the organizations they belong to and will always defend the organization wherever they are. Women constitute the most reliable core in the struggle for economic freedom. We therefore need to organize women of the EFF into a women command with the necessary autonomy to pursue political programs and not just attend court actions of celebrity offenders. Within the broader collective, the EFF should be at the forefront of struggles that seeks to liberate rural women and their battles for access to the land. The EFF Women's Command should be at the forefront of the struggles for the provision of free sanitary towels to all women who cannot afford. The EFF's Women's Command should lead society in the ideological and political analysis of cultural practices that undermine the rights of women. The EFF Women's Command should fill the vacuum that exists because, truth be told, there is no women's organization in South Africa. Comrades, 2016 is the year of local government elections, and therefore the local government elections are a platform upon which the EFF will do very well. We might not know everything about what will happen in 2016 local government elections. But one thing we know for sure is that there is no political party in South Africa that will win outrightly metropolitan municipalities. The ruling party, but in particular, should start packing their goods in Tshwane, in Johannesburg, in Ekurhuleni, and Nelson Mandela metropolitan municipalities. We went to the general election with interim structures of the EFF and very few volunteers to conduct door-to-door. Our program for local government elections should start immediately, and branches should know the number of voters in each and every voting district. All branches of the EFF should have voters' roll of their wards and begin to speak to each and every voter and persuade them about the EFF. Local government elections are elections that will require maximum discipline from all members and activists of the EFF. The incoming CCT should put in place guidelines for the selection of councillors. And once decisions have been taken democratically and within the context of democratic centralism, all members should support the decision and rally all forces behind the organization. The democratic centralist character of the EFF is an important principle which will keep this organization together. If we undermine the democratic centralism principle and begin to question and undermine the decision of the majority and the decision of the upper structures, we'll never have an organization. I say this at the back of my mind. I've had to engage the delegates and the leadership of the Metro in the Western Cape. And I want to repeat that a decision taken by the War Council on your delegation is final, because the constitution of the EFF says the decisions of the higher structure are binding on the lower structures of the EFF. We must all respect the democratic centralism as a pillar that will hold this organization together for a very long time. Some of the behavioral issues we noticed during regional and provincial People's Assemblies anti-EFF and anti-revolutionary democracy. I wish to tell you the Northern Cape. Immediately after this People's Assembly, the new leadership will visit you to investigate a rowdy behavior displayed during your provincial People's Assembly. And we are saying to you, the Northern Cape, you have an obligation to conduct yourself in a manner that will show that you regret the incidences that occurred in the provincial People's Assembly. I wish to warn you that such conduct you displayed in your provincial assembly will never be repeated here. But if we think we are just raising issues without a very clear plan on how we are going to deal with those issues, I advise you to just try so that you become a practical example of how we deal with anarchy in this National People's Assembly. All those who disrupted our meetings and our lower structures, we didn't want to act because you were going to say we are paging you because you do not support us. But we urge the new leadership to pay attention on what happened in the Northwest People's Assembly. We need a decisive action taken, including amongst those members of parliament who were participating in such disruptive activities. I've on a number of occasions warned you individually, and you did not listen. Now it is for the organization to act on ill-discipline and disruptive behavior. Anarchy as the highest form of lawlessness will never be tolerated in the EFF. Let me remind you, in front of South Africans, and also tell you that none of the people sitting in front here who has encouraged you to do those things will be there when the organization deal with you decisively. Sometimes you must refuse to take illegal instruction, especially from disruptive leadership, because when you get into trouble, they will never associate with you. You will be alone. Comrades, fighters and commissars, the EFF is the only organization that will liberate the people of South Africa. There is no other vehicle that has the energy, determination, the will, and focus to change South Africa towards economic freedom. Those who are doubtful should just look into the recent past history and will appreciate that we do not only possess great potential but massive strength to take the struggle forward. We are the ones South Africa has been waiting for. We have to keep this organization together. We have to keep this organization together, and in the process, doomsayers will always predict doom, and they will never see. We have been to the mountaintop, and we have seen the future, and the future looks very bright. South Africa will get to the land of economic freedom, and at the forefront of the economic freedom will be the EFF. We should never be tired, because our principle is CIC, no surrender, no retreat, we shall overcome. I therefore declare this National People's Assembly open. Salute!